The Jeskai of 10 years ago were a people of prowess, granting a buff for each non-creature spell cast, including the very first. Whereas the Jeskai of Tarkir Dragonstorm care more about the flurry of spells, the second indicating a pattern of spell casting. Keeping in theme with the new mechanical identity of the Jeskai, Taigum is the second of a very particular type of card ever printed, and that is the mono blue grizzly bear without a drawback. Each color has its strengths and weaknesses, and from the very beginning in Alpha, one of those differences was made clear. Green had access to more powerful creatures than any other color, and nowhere was this more evident than in the almighty vanilla grizzly bear, the only creature to be printed as a 2/2 for 2, 1 and a color, without a downside. This card was so significant it informs our vernacular over 30 years later. It didn't take long for white to establish itself as the second best creature color, earning its grizzly bear badge with Knight Errant in Portal. It wasn't until Weatherlight with Urtai's Familiar that every color had a 2/2 creature castable for 1 colored and 1 generic mana, but the ravine between the Selesnya vanilla and the Grixis drawback creatures continued to set these colors apart. Green and white received several functional reprints of Grizzly Bear and Knight Errant, while the other colors were envious, only wishing that they would turn green. Invasion brought a horde of Phyrexians to overwhelm Dominaria, and what could the plane do but muster all the power it had to fight back? In rallying their defenses, they produced the first and second bear with upside to see print: Kavu Titan and Nomadic Elf. White received its first upgraded bear only 1 year later with Patrol Hound in Odyssey. Years passed by, green and white receiving new toys bears with abilities, while blue, black, and red had to be satisfied without the bear necessities. That is, until green hit the ground running in the set of Innistrad, with 3 upgraded bears in its ranks. Meanwhile, black was just learning how to walk. Black had been producing 2/2 zombie tokens since Alliances, with the first physical iteration breaking down the door in Unhinged. The gothic horror plane of Innistrad essentially staples a mana cost to the generic undead monstrosity, allowing black to officially claim its title as the middle color with a balance of creatures and spells. It took only 1 year for black to receive its first bear with upside, far quicker than either of its predecessors. But of course, power creep is non-linear. In Gatecrash 3 months after our return to Ravnica, we revisited the abilityless zombie, and then black seemed to devolve, not just returning to its blank, flavor-only text box, but even stepping back to the drawback bear. Rarity has always played a role in power level, but it's not a simple one-to-one that rares are always stronger than uncommons, which are always stronger than commons. Born of the Gods, however, showed blatantly the connection between power level and rarity. For the first time ever, 2 bears were printed in the same color in the same set, with one that was strictly better than the other. Black showing difficulty in choosing whether to stay with its neglected spellslingers or join the ranks of the creature colors. It was clear which side it landed on. As we transitioned from the 20-year-long design of 3 set blocks to just 2 set blocks, power creep increased. Increased, you might say, and it didn't take long before red was making history too, on the same plane that black had 5 years earlier. This left blue as the sole color without a grizzly bear variant, Grizzly Variant. It had long boasted to be the color that cared most about spells, which made it the de facto worst at producing creatures. Red didn't exhibit the same hesitation that black had years before. In Amonkhet, red dove headfirst with 2 upgraded bears, one of which even still sees some competitive play. Amonkhet, a momentous set for bears, also introduced the first colorless 2/2 for 2 without a drawback. Set after set, year after year, we continued to receive new bears with upside in now 4 out of 5 colors. And every few years, a new record of most bears printed in a single expansion was set. Dominaria with 10, Wilds of Eldraine with 14, and the current reigning champion, Outlaws of Thunder Junction with 17, including the first ever printed blue grizzly bear, and it was printed with upside. The rise in power creep has increased precipitously over the last several years, so steeply in fact that it feels we're taking steps 2 or even 3 at a time. This drastic power level shift can be easily identified by the increase in bans of newly printed cards, the shaking up of nearly every format's metagame with new supplemental sets, but nowhere is it clearer to me than when I ponder the humble bear. I always knew Blue would eventually get a grizzly bear, and I'm not even mad about it. Heck, a grizzly bear is basically stone unplayable even in limited unless you desperately need a 15th creature. But I feel we glossed over a momentous occasion, not allowing Blue to have its day in the sun, getting a plain vanilla 2/2 for 1 and a blue. The first coming of each grizzly bear in a color felt archetypal of that color's philosophies. The grizzly bear in green, a wild animal, a force of nature, a being that would kill to survive, but ultimately succumb to the might of a larger predator. The knight errant, a human knowing right and wrong, choosing the side of justice, a warrior devoted only to their conscience. The walking corpse, a lifeless husk disturbed from its peaceful slumber to serve the ambitions of whatever self-serving wizard invoked this dark magic. For red, I actually prefer to look to the 4th functional reprint of the Falconwrath Reaver, which I believe embodies the red identity better. The plain agnostic goblin assailant. I couldn't think of anything to write that encapsulated Red's philosophies more than the flavor text already on the card. What he lacks in patience, intelligence, empathy, lucidity, hygiene, ability to follow orders, self-regard, and discernible skills, he makes up for in sheer chaotic violence. I fear that we've lost a beautiful card that could fully encapsulate the blue identity with never being given a color-shifted grizzly bear. What creature type's name and flavor text would adequately encompass the color of curiosity, study, cold truth, and dedication to knowledge overall? I've tried my hand at creating just that with Prying Squid. It didn't realize tearing the sub apart would lead to the crew's death, though that knowledge wouldn't have changed its course of action. That light was far too interesting to ignore. I'm happy to see Blue finally crossing the aisle from drawback to upside on the most cornerstone stat block and mana cost in the game. Taigam is a great second iteration of the Blue Bear. I just wished for the first version we'd have paused in the middle, cleared our mind, and reflected on the history we were making.